Come on.
They're right there!
Let's go. Move, 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 move.
This episode of Choices Not Chances podcast is sponsored by Louisiana Gun Shop, located on Highway 90 West in Broussard, Louisiana, just south of Lafayette. For more information, stay tuned at the end of this episode.
This is Choices Not Chances podcast with Ryan and Matt. I'm your co-host, Matthew Charette. Sitting next to me is Ryan Rogers. Ryan.
Today we're joined by a special guest called Rick Greene. Rick is here as an Army-trained Russian-Eurasia expert to discuss the Russian invasion of Ukraine 1 year after the fact. Rick is a former Army colonel who served at the U.S. Embassy Moscow from 2000 to 2007, leading counter-terror, counter-proliferation, and threat reduction cooperation efforts with Russian ministries, including the Ministry of Defense. He was the Harvard University National Security Fellow in 2003 and served in Germany from 96 to 99, assigned as an arms control inspector. He led on-site and international inspection teams throughout Eastern and Central Europe and the former Soviet Union, monitoring treaties and agreements like the Dayton Accords in the former Republic of Yugoslavia, conventional forces in Europe, intermediate nuclear forces, and biological and chemical weapons conventions. Rick is a senior paratrooper and jumpmaster and was assigned in his basic branch military police, served at Fort Bragg with Airborne, Fort Drum Light Infantry, Fort Hood, Armor, in Texas before he was overseas for his assignments. In 1994, he spent 6 months in Georgia monitoring and reporting progress and ceasefire violations for the United Nations during the Georgian-Russian Civil War. In 98, just prior to the NATO air campaign to expel Serbian forces from Kosovo, Rick was assigned as an Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe as part of a multinational Kosovo diplomatic observer mission. He has worked and traveled and has living experience in over 50 countries, including 6 years in Germany, 6 years in Russia, 3 years in Iraq. Rick is fluent in Russian speaking with varying degrees of aptitude in Ukrainian, Bulgarian, Czech, Arabic, German, Spanish, and Serbian. He served in multiple hostile fire zones, including Grenada, Georgia, former Yugoslavia, Kosovo, Iraq, and Afghanistan after he retired. He supported DoD missions and initiatives for over 40 years. He's a patriot, and he joins us today to talk about the invasion of Ukraine a year in. We're almost a year into the day. And Rick has been generous enough to join and give us an inside look, a deeper look from somebody who truly understands the region, the culture, the people, Vladimir Putin, at a level that most Americans don't understand. And so he's going to answer some questions, and been super excited to make it happen. So, Rick Greene, thanks for coming out. Appreciate having you on the show, man.
My privilege.
So today, guys, I guess you could say from the bio, from the read-in, kind of guess where we're going. But I personally have a lot of questions and a lot of, call it concern around geopolitics at the time. Probably so much so that, my kids are affected by it, which is not good. And I'm trying to remedy that. But, like my daughter's 7 and she asks questions about Chinese spy balloons and Russian wars in Ukraine. And that means I'm probably doing it wrong. So, but I have questions, and I've recently made contact with Rick through connections at the VFW that we both attend out in Holly Ridge. And we kind of had a couple of conversations, and he's somebody that is in the know, clearly all things Russia and Ukraine, or let's say most things. And I wanted to have him on just to ask questions, just to see where we are geopolitically, kind of get the backstory of why we're in the situation we're in geopolitically, and then maybe what we can expect for the future. So again, Rick, if you want to start, if we just take it back a little bit, back to maybe some of your time spent over there, and give us culturally what we're looking at, and then kind of the foundational building blocks of the conversation that we're about to have.
Okay. Ryan, thanks again for asking me to come on the show. Much appreciate every opportunity to share my thoughts and opinions on Russia, and more succinctly on Russia and Ukraine because of what's happening. I mean, we're talking 2 days from now being the 1-year anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Nothing could be more topical right now. And the way that, like you spoke of geopolitically, the way that branches out into China and Europe, the consequences, nothing. As far as kids are concerned, nothing's more important right now. So it's... I retired in 2007 from Moscow, from the embassy in Moscow, from the Army. And during my retirement speech, a lot of folks will say, well, you're a Russophile. I mean, you love all things about Russia. I said, no, I'm not a Russophile. I mean, it's what I spent my career doing, but I consider myself a Blairophile or a Taylorophile, just like you do, your kids. All right, you love your kids. All right, so I want to know as much as I can know about what's going on and what's going to affect them. Long after I'm gone, this is going to be an issue, and they're going to have to deal with it. And if I spent 20 years studying Russia, and some of that knowledge helped us craft a framework to work with them, long after I'm gone, and when my kids and my grandkids have to develop relationships with them, then the work I spent for those 20 years was worth it. So that's why I consider it important. I did spend 6 years in the embassy in Russia, two different tours, 2 different agencies, Defense Intelligence Agency and the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. First one was working as a military attaché and working in coordination and cooperation with our interagency and joint staff to make sure that we were communicating properly and when necessary, coordinating and collaborating with our Russian counterparts. And that was 2000 to 2002, so you can guess 2001 was right in between there. There was a lot of cooperation. A lot more cooperation than obviously we've got now. And the second tour was 2003 to end of 2006. I retired in 2007 with the Defense Threat Reduction Agency and Cooperative Threat Reduction Initiatives, chemical, biological, nuclear, conventional forces type.
Is that like counter-proliferation works?
Yes. Non-proliferation, counter-proliferation. Primarily making sure that those nuclear, biological, chemical, radiological weapons or precursors were properly secured, properly managed.
And what countries do you support when you're doing that?
Well, I was stationed in Moscow, but we had offices at the time. The Defense Threat Reduction Agency had offices in Kazakhstan, Ukraine, Russia, and Baku, and Azerbaijan. Yeah, and we with different projects that run anywhere from helping the Azerbaijanis with their coastal defense forces. They're right there on the Caspian Sea. The Iranians have no respect for the international waters as the Caspian Sea is concerned. They know where the oil is. So we trained their coastal defense forces, their marine coastal defense forces, to board ships, gave them equipment, just to help them be a little bit more proactive, be a little bit more confident in the way they dealt with security around the Caspian Sea. But nuclear weapons in Russia have to be secured. have to be monitored. I mean, we talked about the Putin just pulling out, basically, of at least withdrawing from participation. He didn't really withdraw from the treaty itself, but he withdrew from the participation of the START treaty. Numbers aren't going to change, according to everything I've seen on.
You mean of weapons?
Yeah, the warhead count won't change, but it does throw a cloak over it a little bit, and we won't have as much transparency as we would have liked. And that treaty ends in February of 26 anyway, so that really only gives us 3 years to map out something that has common ground between the two countries. I'm hopeful that we can do that.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that we can do that too, and especially with. Like, it doesn't need to get to that again. If it gets to that, we're all, the kids are in a different situation, right?
Yeah, they'll be hiding under their desks again.
We've been operating under mutually assured destruction policy for 50 plus years. And what bothers me in recent technological advancements is, near peer nation states like China or Russia talking about having advanced delivery vehicles for these warheads, because then if you have an advanced delivery system, mutually assured destruction policy kind of gets tampered with a little bit or changed outright. So it's interesting. I don't mean for it to be scary, but it is one of those things that you don't want to be ignorant about.
No, it's got to be managed. It's definitely got to be managed, at least bilaterally, if not universally. It's existential. I mean, it could certainly end the world. You're right. Yeah. I don't like that. Going back a second to Azerbaijan, at what time were you helping them out? Like year-wise? Yeah, that was probably 2004, 5-ish.
So before Armenia and...
No, I mean, Armenia and Azerbaijan has been the most recent incursions in Nagorno-Karabakh. I mean, that's been going on for decades. So it was during the time that Armenia and Azerbaijan were considered still at war. So the assistance that we were providing to Azerbaijan was closely monitored and managed by the government of Armenia, and we have a agreement, or at the time we had an agreement that if we provided assistance to one country, we would provide something in like to the other country, just to make sure that the balance of power was where it needed to be, and we didn't provide any offensive capability to the Azerbaijanis. We helped them manage their area of the Caspian Sea more effectively, more efficiently.
Gotcha. Well, it was just a interesting little thing, because I did a little bit of research when I was covering, the uprising in drone warfare. And Azerbaijan and Armenia's war was one of the highlights, at least for, I think General Berger and some of the commandant staff when trying to, with this new force design, with looking at what to keep, what to go away. I think we learned a lot from that battle or that war, especially with UAVs.
Yeah, I'm certain both the Armenians and the Azerbaijanis learned a lot. Not only offensive use of drones, but how counter drone operations are important as well. And one of those two countries suffered much more from drones than the other. And it was a big learning experience. And Russians were into that as well.
I think everybody's into it now. Okay, so where do we move on from there? So let's talk about before, when we were talking offline, leading up to, almost a year ago, leading up to the invasion of Ukraine, let's say the 12 months working up to it, it seemed to be that not a lot of people were taking it serious. It seemed to be, what do I know? I only have open source, but it seemed to me like we weren't really expecting that to happen. What's your view on that, or what's your take on that?
Well, I mean, that's all I have is open source as well. It's just I read a lot of open source material, whether it's in English or in a language that I can read, and I still have enough contacts, all over that I get open source information that other folks don't get a chance to read. So, some of it's not worth reading. Some of it is, and it all comes together. If you read enough of it, you can put the pieces of the puzzle together. I was pretty sure that he was coming very early. I think a lot of folks were. It's just that they didn't want to say, either because they really were hoping that it wasn't what was going to happen, or that's the policy that we had. I'm not sure. But his array of forces, what he was bringing up as close to the border as he was, and this is real easy now, Monday morning quarterback and looking back at it, but I had 5 or 6 people ask for my opinion on what I thought. Nobody important, obviously, just friends, but they were all curious. And I said, yeah, it's a no-brainer for me. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But from what he's mustering, on the other side of the border, as far as order of battle is concerned, and the sheer numbers, and the fact that I know, because I've been on site dozens of Russian military facilities, I know I have a better feel for what it takes to move those forces out of garrison and keep them out of garrison for as long as he has. That's not an exercise. He's not going to spend. He doesn't have that kind of money. So he means business, and sure enough, that's what happened a year ago in 2 days.
Yeah. I had asked several people myself about what they thought, especially leading right up to when he came across, a couple of days, and they're like, nah, man, it's just a show of force. And I'm like, man, that many people, that much equipment is that close to the border? It seemed to me, and, of course, I don't want a Monday morning quarterback either. But at the time I was saying that, like, you don't move that much of your resource. But be that as it may, it's not about being right or wrong. It's about where do we go and how do we fix it, and what's the best policy moving forward. So I think you know more about this by far than me, so I'm just going to ask you to kind of take the reins as far as what you've seen, where you feel like we are a year in, what it looks like now, both losses on both sides, consequences, and then where we intend or where you see us going from here.
All right. The losses are staggering. I mean, that's just what our estimates are. 200,000 killed and wounded, not able to return to battle on the Russian side alone. And that goes up. It has skyrocketed here in the last couple of months. I would watch the numbers. I get a daily map drop and some equipment and personnel numbers, just analysts that are tracking that. And I mean, anybody that was watching those numbers watched it as it crept up closer and closer and closer to 100K. And then in about 6 weeks, it went from 100K to 150K.
What changed in that 6 weeks?
The Russians pushed harder. Wagner Group and its emptying the prisons, the convicts that they hired, and using them for cannon fodder, pushing them right out front, and gaining a little bit of ground but losing thousands. because of it. I would guess that was the primary boost in those numbers. The numbers haven't slowed. That slope is probably fairly similar here in the last couple of weeks, and that's because they're pushing hard. The Russians are pushing hard to try to get as much ground as possible before main battle tanks are introduced. Western main battle tanks are introduced. That's close. I think maybe 2 weeks, I would guess, at least for the German tanks. Our tanks, maybe the British tanks, the Chieftains, and our Abrams are probably a little bit further down, but the Leopards are I think, are close to being introduced
to Ukraine.
Yep. Mm-hmm. The issue is going to be maintenance and sustainment. They're smart. They're very capable warfighters. So they're going to get their heads around the Bradleys and the main battle tanks, I think, very, very quickly. And I think their use tactically is going to surprise the Russians. The issue, like I said, is going to be sustainment and maintenance. But everyone knew that. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's whenever you give major pieces of equipment to another country, sustainment and maintenance are a big part of that. It's just that's a three-headed dragon. I did read something. I forgot the source now. It was something that came in over the internet that said U.S. troops weren't going to be on the ground, but the chances of U.S. contractors assisting in that maintenance and sustainment of the new equipment was more than likely to happen. So it still keeps boots off the ground. U.S. contractors.
Not a military show, not an American face.
They don't count as boots.
Yeah. I think we already have like mercenary contractors over there helping out.
Yeah.
Well, I know we do have some of my friends.
Yeah. There's Americans that are fighting right now. It's just that sustainment and that maintenance piece, I think, is probably going to be let as a contract. And
let me ask you this. A lot of people have suggested that the main forces that have invaded Ukraine and fought there have been conscripts and old equipment and almost seeming outdated. Is that true? And if it is true, is that by design? Is there a whole lot of extra stuff in the back that he hasn't used, is what I'm saying?
He does have a reserve. I don't think it's a whole lot of extra. I will tell you that as far as I can recall, the first group of forces that he lost were some of the elite airborne forces that took control of Kyiv airport and then had to fall back or were destroyed. So he has used elite forces. Their army is heavily conscripted anyways, so their concept of a professional service is nothing like we've been used to here for the last 50 years. Mm-hmm. So yeah, just another vignette. I would on-site inspections that we would do on Russian bases, Air Force, Army, their Marines, coastal defense forces. Pretty much a protocol and a schedule of events. So these inspections are mandated by the Senate. So there's a treaty book that you follow. There's a set of steps and certain things that have to be inspected while you're on site. and part of that process is giving a briefing to, if you're inspecting, to the escort team, the host team that you're in. So we go to a Russian base, and the host would brief first, and they'd have 06s, colonels and lieutenant colonels doing all the briefing, and all the running around the background was usually done by majors. we'd get time to do our briefing, and it's all my NCOs. I'd have E6s, E7s briefing everything that we were doing. And every time we did that, I got two responses. Either they were really angry because they thought we were trying to show them up because our NCO Corps was so professional, or they were just so envious. It was like they're shaking their heads, and they knew it was off the record, so they could basically speak freely, but they were so in awe of what our professional soldiers could do, and they would never trust any of their NCOs or even their proper sheiks, their warrant officers, to do something like that. So I think that's why they had 05s and 06s doing what I had E6s, E7s doing, and my guys were knocking it out of the park. Yeah. And they knew it too. They'd stand up there and they knew what they were doing, and they knew what kind of looks they were getting. So it was just that's why you promote a professional army.
Oh yeah.
All right, because that message got sent. Got sent multiple times to the highest levels. There's no doubt about it.
Is this cultural? Because all the people I fought are the same way. They didn't trust any of their underlings. It was always the top boss that would talk to anybody of esteem from our side. Is it a cultural thing, or is it just they do it wrong?
It's probably historical and cultural. A lot of countries are like that. I mean, you said a lot of the folks that you fought against were the same way. So certainly, the Middle Eastern armies, a lot of them are like that. Those that have turned the corner and have become more professional have picked up our model, and I mean, all the European countries that I ever worked with, alongside of, they all have a professional non-commissioned officer corps. That I know it's cliche, but it's the backbone of the Army. I mean, they do the work. They do everything that needs to be done to get the job done. So it was just that's I spoke as highly and as often as I could about the teams that I went in with, because I had one thing to do. If I was a deputy team chief, or the team chief had one thing to do, and then all the rest of the work that was done, whether it was a weapons specialist doing his job, or interpreter, translator doing their job, we couldn't have done it with anything short of the teams that we brought in. They were just. But yeah, it's cultural and historical. It's just, I guess you could say it's part of the Communist Party psyche that only the top brass gets to understand what's going on. That's what's going on right now in
I think that's
Russia.
their downfall too. Well, at least it seems like it would be to me, because like the way that we work is with a decentralized chain of command and. Ever-flowing information and fusion up and down. And I feel like if I didn't know why I was fighting and you didn't tell me the big picture, then I don't have enough to give you everything. And we figured that out. It just seems culturally ingrained, like you're saying, in them, that it's a top couple of people that are going to be orchestrating the show.
The lessons learned that that've come out of Ukraine here so far are a lot of them are just that they don't have enough flexibility, and that impacts not only tactical, movement on the ground of offensive forces, but also the tail of that operation, the logistics part of that operation, and when the list of lessons learned comes out, and it's little by little they have already, but it's going to be obvious to all of us, and it'll be obvious to the Russians as well, that their blueprint is just, I mean...
The Russian army was one that I revered, and like almost kind of like was like, man, if we go there, it's going to be on. And then watching it unfold, I kept waiting for it to get better, and it's like their tactics didn't look good. They still don't look good. Their logistics looked terrible. I mean, vehicles out of power, out of fuel, lined up. And I'm like, you do that against the United States, man.
Or NATO.
Or anybody in NATO, like, you're going to get wrecked quick. And so I think, maybe a lot of that's you can call it privilege if you want, but we've been practicing for 22 years or so, in a main war with big logistics and across the pond. And we got that shit down, seemingly, when you watch the other world powers come out, not going across any kind of big logistical, ocean, let's say, and not doing that and coming across on the ground, and you run out of fuel and you run out of these things, and then you're taking losses like this. Like, I don't fear it anymore, right? But it's just very telling, the nations that have been at war versus the nations who haven't been at war for 20 years. It just showed through. So
Russia's been in conflict for decades in certain areas, but they've never really went toe to toe with an adversary. There's certainly nothing like us, and probably nothing like anything that exists in NATO now. So,
do you think it's humbled them?
It's humbled some. It's also emboldened some. That's why you're getting the rhetoric that you're getting out of the Kremlin. Arguably, Russia is the weakest it's been militarily in my lifetime.
Right now.
Yep.
Yep.
For a number of reasons. And arguably, NATO is the strongest it's been in my lifetime. That's a math problem that could have significant consequences.
You mean by desperation?
Yeah. I mean, it's just...
Because that's what it gets to, right?
It could have consequences that are extremely positive, because, the handwriting's on the wall. The Kremlin recognizes that they need some real and significant overhauls. They talked reform for decades. Talked reform the whole time that I was there. And very little of it came to fruition.
Reform in what ways? Militarily?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it just didn't happen?
Their Ministry of Defense, like our Department of Defense, every year had some sort of reform initiative. And they did reorganize a little bit, and that did, I don't know if it helped, but on paper it was a success as far as what they wanted to do and what they ended up doing. I don't know if that was any more than shuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic, though. We'll see.
Yeah. Check. Now let's switch over, and then we'll go back, after a bit. But let's talk Ukraine for a minute. Can you speak to Volodymyr Zelensky and his let's call it the stoicism to his rise? Because I did a little research for my new book on him, and have a chapter dedicated to the emergence of leadership. And he's one of those cases where he emerged at a time, or his leadership has emerged at a time that was aligned with the stars, in my opinion, and then used his stoic attitude to resolve for the Ukrainian people to not just bring his own people into fight, but to bring my people into fight. And people of a bunch of different countries said, no, we'll follow him, or we'll go fight for him. And do you have something to,
he's definitely going to be a case study. For a long time, people are going to look at it and say, how did this work? How was this successful? It's Ukraine. They're not renowned for world leaders. All right, and this guy stepped up. and he's performed. And it's not a one-man show, just like our commander-in-chief's not a one-man show. The people that he's got working with him are confident. They have the confidence of the people. He's like I said, he's going to be a case study for a long time.
What's interesting is he kind of got his claim to fame through Hollywood, right? Their Hollywood, through a TV show. The name of it is escaping me right now, but essentially he was a teacher and ran for president of their country on a non-corruption platform.
He's a comedian, actually.
And a comedian. Yeah. And before that, I think he went to school for law, but didn't like it. And his parents were a little bit upset that he wasn't going to pursue that. But what's interesting, he runs this whole show as this anti-corruption, going to save the sanctity of Ukraine. And then they run for president for real off the popularity of the show, and even call his platform, they name it after the show, his actual political platform. And then he wins, and then through stoic leadership, some of his opposition now work as generals in his army for him, which is just insane to me. So it's one of those stories, and people, I don't know much other than what I've read, but there's some cool things, especially when you're completely, in the eyes of the world, outmatched and outgunned, and then giving, the United States gives you a way out, and you're like, no, we're going to stay here and fight. I think that, for the warrior in me, and the warriors, I'm sure, over there fighting now, it's like, no, that's what we follow.
He published a book, 2021. If you don't have it, it's a small book, but it's
Zelensky.
Yeah. If you don't have it, I'll drop it off. But at least one of the two famous quotes that he has is in the book, and that's when we offered to evacuate him. He said, "I don't need a ride. I need more ammunition."
That's right.
Okay. And then the other one is. I wrote it down too. It's critical. If Russia stops fighting, the war ends. If Ukraine stops fighting, Ukraine ends.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I mean that's in the hearts of every Ukrainian. That's probably every Ukrainian, but certainly all the Ukrainians that are face to face, nose to nose with Russian forces right now. I mean, they know if they stop fighting, Ukraine goes away. I mean, that's Putin's goal.
Yeah. What do you think? What do you think the propensity is for Volodymyr Zelensky to use offensive weapons and push past Ukraine onto Russia?
I don't think that would be his intent. I think he's got the capability now. Somebody has struck into certain ammo depots and certain airfields with drones already, and he probably does have the artillery capability as well. And if it's to interdict supply and military targets, purely military targets, then I would suspect that would be a new phase of the operation, and if it was effective, he'd continue to do that. I've long said that a buffer zone needs to be created between the
like a demilitarized zone in between them,
DMZ of some sort, and that way they give us a little bit more warning time, if there was any belligerence or aggressiveness, and it sends a signal that your behavior is unacceptable, and this is what happens. Not only did you not get the ground that you thought you deserved, but you lost territory as well. That's a big deal. That Putin's not going to lose land, Russian land like that. Not Not
See,
quietly.
that's where I get nervous because it's like, let's say he does start losing land. Well, he has nuclear weapons.
He has low-yield nuclear weapons that he can use on the battlefield, absolutely.
And it's like, will he? Well, I don't know. He's getting older. He's getting close to the end of what would be a male Russian's lifespan on average, I would think.
He's past that.
Yeah, and I think he knows that. And
Yeah, he's not your average Russian.
and what? Yeah, he's not. He's not. That's a fact. What do you think? What does it look? What does loss look like?
For who?
Like for Putin, is that even an option? Because if he loses in at the head of 200,000+ Russian sons, like at some point the Russian people are going to be kind of fed up, I think, with that. And if he loses power, what happens to him?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I'd be more concerned with what happens to us if he loses power. I mean,
How do you mean?
I was told when he came in, I took a language refresher course in late 1999, and some Russian emigres. We talked because they elevate the conversation to geopolitics to see if you can reach a 3 or a 4 level out of 5 on your language skills.
Okay.
And we talked about Yeltsin stepping down and Putin taking over. That happened on December 31st, 1999. And I was all for stronger, firmer, more reliable leadership in Yeltsin than Yeltsin. I mean, Yeltsin and Clinton got along well. We got we found common ground a lot more than probably with any other Russian or Soviet leader under Yeltsin. I also watched the economy tank in Russia, and I watched the voucher system that they had established be corrupted and people's life savings stolen. I watched the ruble rate at zero after zero after zero, and so it wasn't good. I thought the instability, that type of instability, was more dangerous. So I said, no, it's time. Russia's always loved a firm hand. Whether it was a czar or a Communist Party leader, it's a federation of Russian states, republics, whatever you want to call them. It needs to be held together firmly, and so I said I'm looking forward to the change, and sure enough, the instructor, Russian emigre. She said, be careful what you wish for. So that leopard doesn't change its spots. He's a KGB colonel. That doesn't get switched off just because he's the president of Russia now. Mm-hmm. And she was right. She was absolutely right. Dmitry Medvedev, who was president when the Russian Constitution didn't allow Putin to do a third term, so Putin dropped down to be PM. I'm certain he ran the show anyways for those 4 years that Medvedev was president, and then he's come right back in, and they've changed the Constitution, and who knows how long he's got elections coming up in 2024.
Yeah, but there's no real opposition, right?
There is, and cracks are starting to form.
Okay.
I read a couple of things here recently. Medvedev, just today I read, said it'll be a disaster if Russia loses. He's right, but he could also be just playing that card like you can't afford, guys. China, you can't afford to let Russia lose. Mm-hmm. Iran, you can't afford to let Russia lose. Whoever it is, Germany, if you're listening, you can't afford to have Russia lose. All right, because like I just said, I mean, it's just the confederation or the federation, the Russian Federation, would splinter.
What does that look like?
What, a splintered Russian Federation? It's a disaster. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're talking probably the Confederation of North Caucasus states in the south, potentially breaking away. They know how much oil they've got down there. They know that they could sustain themselves if they didn't have a central army that could contain them. Siberia. I mean, there's not an awful lot.
What happens to nuclear weapons?
That's the bigger concern. That's the number one concern. Because they are in different places all over the Russian Federation. And worst casing it, they lose control.
What's that mean? They lose control though. Like we take control? NATO takes control?
My opinion, if they lost control, we may very well offer to assist.
To keep them stable?
Yeah, and keep them out of the hands of elements that could use them just to promote their own profile. Even if it was an area that was looking to elevate its stature on the world stage. Using a nuclear weapon would do that. But I would guess we've done it for a long time, working with the Russians to help them secure and manage and keep safe their nuclear arsenal. The Cooperative Threat Reduction Initiative that was Nunn-Lugar spent I think it's like $10 billion in 10 years to it's multinational. It's not just the U.S.
Yeah.
To help them do just that, manage, secure, store, upkeep, upgrade if they needed to, just to make it less dangerous. That program's successful. That program when Lugar was getting ready to retire from Indiana. Or Illinois. He brought his protege in to help take control of the program with Senator Nunn out of Georgia. That senator, Barack Obama. So he came to Russia. I met him at the airport in just outside of Moscow. Very, very capable, very interested, and he toured multiple sites in Russia, and then it took over the helm of the program from Lugar until he ran for president. I mean, I got a chance to meet Bush when he came in. That was, it was more cool for the other guys. He worked the crowd, and he's getting ready to bolt out the door. And we're all in our Class A's, it's a joint assignment. So there's Marines, there's Air Force, there's Army, and the whole auditorium was filled with flags and everything. And I said, Mr. President, you got time for a quick picture with all the troops? If Secret Service had laser eyes, I'd have been fried, because he was getting ready to go out the door, and there was no other good opportunity, and I did not want to miss this opportunity to get those guys and gals that we had on our team, both the attaché team and the Defense Threat Reduction team. I mean, it's just, they don't get an opportunity like that. So we lined them all up, it's a great photo. They love the photo. I'm certain it's a highlight of their military career, one of them anyways. I took a bit of a brow beating.
I bet you did.
Because we got the picture, but the picture is fantastic.
That's great.
Yeah.
You have to show it to me. I want to see that one. Where do we stand now?
With what?
As far as what do you see in the next, let's say, 6 to 8 weeks, couple of months?
Yeah.
I know you said introducing maybe tanks and things of that nature soon, but where do you see as the conflict in general going from here?
I don't have a crystal ball.
Yeah.
And those folks that are giving their opinion, on television and everything. I mean, they've got staffs. They've got a lot more experience at much higher levels than I do. So they're in the know. But I've long said this ends in Crimea. When that phase of the war starts, and it starts next with the introduction of main battle tanks and upgraded infantry fighting vehicles, and then perhaps longer range artillery. No need to upgrade air forces right now, I don't think, not with the current air situation. Moving Su-25 Rockfoots, what they've got right now, and A-10s, they're comparable in a lot of different ways. Upgraded A-10s, maybe, certainly an upgrade. And close air support for those types of aircraft that capability would help, no doubt, especially if the Russians started just flooding the area. Coming across the border, in hordes. I don't see that. I don't see that happening really. So I see advances made in the east, the Ukrainian advances made in the east, and
Like Donbass and past?
Yeah, the Luhansk and the Donetsk, and then Kherson in the south, Zaporizhia.
Is the Russians still holding those places right now?
That certainly Luhansk.
Or is that just kind of the line coming down around?
Well, they certainly are holding significant parts of Luhansk and Donetsk in the northern part of that eastern region.
Okay.
As you swing down Half Moon-like, they have moved out of Kherson.
Kherson was bad for a while.
Yeah, and it was bad on the way out too. So nothing they'd like better than to be able to say they've reclaimed that. Once that has been taken, I think.
Kherson?
No, that whole eastern flank,
Okay.
that whole eastern area, or at least when it looks as if control is working in Ukrainians' advantage, then they can focus on Crimea. That's why I think it ends there. I think, Russia's not going to let Crimea go.
That's where it's going to get bad.
Yeah, so it's
How
either,
far out from them taking Crimea do you think we are? With the current...
most people are very either cautious or pessimistic about the timeline. I think it's this year.
I was going to say, the longer they draw that out, the more money it's costing everybody and lives and everything else. I would think they'd want to get there.
A war of attrition favors Russia. So
Yeah.
Ukraine knows that.
Yeah.
So it depends on how the next phase unfolds.
What's the next phase?
It's
Battle tanks.
Yeah, it's the introduction of upgraded armor. Good tank story. In Georgian Abkhaz Civil War in 1994. Russians all over it. I mean, but I'm sent in, and I'm on the Inguri River, which is the line of demarcation between the breakaway Abkhazian Republic on the Black Sea, which borders Sochi, Russia, on the north, and the rest of Georgia. So this Inguri River flows into the Black Sea and up from the Carpathian Mountains, and so it's a big line of demarcation. So bridges are all gone. I'm sitting on the Abkhaz side, and an Abkhaz, I hear the ground rumbling around me. I'm in a Jeep Cherokee, and I hear the ground behind me rumbling. I'm like, oh, this can't be good. I mean, because I've seen MLTBs, I've seen BTR 60s. I know how the ground operates. You don't even hear them hardly. You don't feel them anyways. You feel the ground shake behind you, it's something a little bit bigger. So I look up behind me, and sure enough, it's a T-72. It's a pretty good sized tank. And it's sitting on a ridge line right behind me, about 50, 60 feet probably, with its main gun pointed across the river. And he's got my exit blocked. I can't go across this. No, I can't go across the bridge. He may have intentionally blocked my exit, but there was no malintent. He came down and talked to me, and we're just talking. And actually had lunch on the hood of my Jeep. So I knew he wasn't trying to block my exit. That's the best place for him to position his Jeep. And we're halfway through the lunch or so, and all of a sudden the ground starts shaking again. And I said, "You got something else coming?" He said, "No, just me." I said, "Okay." I look across the river. Here comes another tank, and and it's on the Georgian side. He's got his tube pointing right over, right at us, because he's pointing at the other tank, and he's heading our way, and I'm packing up. I'm getting ready to go.
Lunch is over.
And I says, I don't need to be between two tanks.
Yep.
He says, "What's the matter?" I said, "The Georgians are positioning a tank right across the river, 300, 400 meters. I don't know what it was, maybe 1,000 meters. Back then, I don't remember.
That's still not that far for a tank.
Yeah, but it was far enough. And he said, "Sit down." He says, "What kind of tank is that?" I said, "It's a T-62. He said, "Okay." He said, "What kind of tank do I got?" I said, "It's a T-72. He says, "You think that tank commander knows what kind of tank I got?" He says, "Yeah, he can see it just like I can see it. He knows it's a T-72. He says, Do you think he thinks that I know what kind of tank he's got, a T-62? He says, "Yeah." He says, "Okay, we both understand. He knows he can't hit me, and if he gets close enough to hit me, he's well within my range. He hasn't got a chance to get a shot off."
Yeah.
So nobody's shooting anybody today, all right? He's just sitting over there because he's just, like a dog marking his territory. He saw me pull up in a T-72. He's pulling up in a T-64. And he says, "Eat your lunch. There'll be no tank battle here today."
Well, thank God.
Yeah.
Oh, man, that'd be nerve-wracking, though, for sure, especially when you're sitting in a Jeep.
Yeah. Unarmored Jeep Cherokee.
Unarmored Jeep Cherokee.
White at that, so that you could plainly see me.
Oh, man. That's insane. That's insane.
Yeah, but tanks are going to be a difference maker. You're going to see that in the next few weeks. Yeah, and then we'll have to see how the Russian people react.
Do you think that there's like Operation Valkyries being planned right now to take Putin out, or are they pretty united on that front?
No, there's cracks.
Yeah.
All the stuff that you're reading, all the stuff that I read are the cracks that are forming. Months ago, it wasn't really spoken of. Conspiracists, somebody that thought that wishful thinking that they were going to get Navalny out of prison, which could very easily happen if there was a change. So he's got his critics, and the ones that are exiled or abroad, sneak in a critical remark every now and then. But most recently, businessmen, oligarchs, even some politicians, and certainly some military commanders even have been noticeably less supportive. So that's the cracks are forming.
Seems like he was paranoid too to me, and maybe it was more over COVID, but anything that I'd see or read, say he's sitting 20 and 30 feet away from people at the head of a table, not letting anybody close to him. Do you think that's paranoia of that type of operation?
Some of it could have been legit COVID concerns. I was in the camp that he was sick. National Intelligence Director, CIA Director, my ambassador in Russia, Bill Burns, was publicly acknowledged that we weren't concerned about his health.
Yeah.
Just from me watching interviews and everything, I was in a camp that supported that. I thought he was not as healthy as he had been previously, but I mean that could have just been age too. You're right. I don't. Right now, last time I looked, it might have been 68 male life expectancy in Russia, and he's over that.
Mm-hmm.
He's taken care of. Okay, he's definitely taken care of, but it could be a lot of different things that could be wrong with him.
I always worried, since this started, I worried that the KGB operative inside him wants to restore the Soviet Union to Mother Russia, and
absolutely,
knowing that you're late on age and you vow that before your own God and your people that you're going to do it, maybe this is his last attempt at trying to restore that, knowing that he's waning or that his time is waning. Or is it geopolitical power making it the right time for him? And I don't like getting political or talking politics too much on my show, but this didn't happen under Trump, and didn't happen under Obama.
Yeah.
Some of it may have started under those, but do you think that this was going to happen regardless of who was at the helm over here?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. And I applaud the commander-in-chief for just the last few movements that he's done. It's really sent the right signal to NATO, to Russia, to Ukraine, to China, even. That which is happening right now in Europe is not lost on China. They're looking at it. That's why they haven't jumped in, both feet behind the Kremlin, is because they see
cracks.
Yeah, and if that and handwriting very well could be on the wall from their perspective. The Russians have a friendship day every year where they celebrate the relationship between China and Russia. It's usually held at the Chinese embassy. Chinese embassy in Moscow is the biggest embassy in Moscow. That's the way states operate. It's reciprocal, which means that in Beijing, the largest embassy that they got there is the Russian embassy. But this Friendship Day spread. The reception is phenomenal. Huge, big fanfare, just all the Russian generals you'd want to see, all the Chinese dignitaries that were in country at the time. Just a great event for an attaché to attend. And I spoke to a Russian 4-star at the time that said he had been stationed as a Soviet officer on the Kazakh border, monitoring the area of China across from the border. And he said, I'd be out there on the platform, and I'd be looking out across the border, and for miles, all you can see is people. I mean, it's just so densely populated. Even in that area, it's just people. It's just mind-boggling. Mm-hmm. And same reception. I'm over, talking to a Chinese 2-star, and he just happened to share the same vignettes as how I was stationed on the Chinese Kazakhstan border. Probably around the same time. They could have easily been looking at each other. And he said, I can remember looking across the border into Russia and seeing nothing but open fields and land for as far as you could see, either birch trees or tundra of some sort, or some sort of wheat being cultivated. It's just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And it resonated so much that two people could be standing, hundreds of feet away from each other, probably looking and seeing two completely different things.
Two different worlds.
Yeah, and that's the point exactly. I mean, Russia's view on the world and China's view on the world, except where they have common ground. And this one, common ground is trying to weaken the status of the United States. That's a common ground. They will seek that type of common ground. But other than that, I'm not sure there's an awful lot of certainly not camaraderie. And I don't know how many times those interest lines intersect.
I see what you're saying. So the common denominator when they are nice with each other is us.
Yeah, just like same thing with a couple other countries as well.
Well, a question, recent news is that Xi Jinping is vowing that he'll put lethal aid behind Russia and helps with them with Ukraine. And also, I think they've already a little bit propped up the ruble. Am I wrong? Or the ruble? Am I wrong in that?
I don't know about propping up the ruble. I mean, they probably stopped the free fall a little bit because China's one of those countries that's not participating in the sanction regime.
Mm-hmm.
Turkey, North Korea, Iran.
All the communist countries, mains?
Well, there's certainly countries who don't have great relationships, except for Turkey with. And the fact that they are helping Russia skirt sanctions, it probably does help the economy and directly impacts the rise or fall of the ruble. The sanctions are working. Mm-hmm. Okay. And we'll get back to China because I know that's where you were going. But the sanctions are working. I hear a lot of criticism from not only my army buddies, but also some of the friends I have that have Russian roots, and I think most of my army buddies are just a little bit apprehensive of looking for successes in the current administration. But these are sanctions that have been in place, some of them for a long time, and my friends with Russian roots think that they're just hurting the common Russian more than they're hurting anybody, and they're right. All right, but that's who's going to make a difference in the long run, unfortunately.
Hey, I think that's kind of the goal, right? If I cripple your people enough, maybe they'll do something about you or withdraw support at least.
But the Kremlin's had at least since 2014, so almost 10 years to prepare for the effects of sanctions. They know what we can do. They know what we have in our kit bag, and we're going to use all of those. So they've found ways in the last 10 years to manipulate the system, and it's not hurting as much as it could. It is. You will see here in the next 6 months. I think the cap on oil barrel prices is really going to bite here in the next few months.
What do you mean by that? Go up?
No.
Come down.
They can't. They won't be able to sell to certain countries over a particular limit, and they need the money. They're at a point now where they need the money, and could use 50% bump in the price of oil, and they're not going to get it on the world market.
Okay, so that cripples them even more?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Of course. So those sanctions are going to start really having an impact. And
are the oligarch sanctions and seizures helping? I thought that might do it.
Absolutely. That's what's helping these cracks form.
Yeah.
Some of them are impacted more than others. Certainly, when the numbers wash out, they're going to be losing zeros. Multiple zeros in their net worth. Mm-hmm. And that's why I think I think we're closer to the end than we are
now. But here's my question. So, and I know you don't have a crystal ball, but what I think is, if Vladimir Putin is who I think he is, even when that all starts to work and starts to break down, I still think he becomes maybe even more dangerous. Do you not?
No, yeah, absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
what's the off ramp there where we can say no more war, and he retains some sort of power to save face? Like, how's that even?
Yeah,
I don't even know how that works.
I think most people will say that there are three options. Either he gets what he wants in Ukraine, or enough of what he wants for political survivability. That's option one. Option two is he's losing at such a rate where it just looks as if the only option he has is to use low-yield nuclear weapons on the battlefield, especially to hold on to Crimea. And then he does, and he ends up with some sort of a victory.
What, and like keep Crimea or
keep,
use low yield nukes to move all the way through and take Ukraine?
NATO's not going to let that happen.
Right.
Okay, so that's I think that's pretty obvious now to them as well, to the Russians.
That it's not going to happen.
Yeah. So that could have been a plan at one time. Obviously, the scorched earth plan that they put in place already, they didn't care about, saving any of the infrastructure in Ukraine for future use. They might have been the first month, as they were rolling in. They thought they could be in Kyiv in 3 days.
Thought they'd just fold. Yeah.
Yeah, but that didn't happen. So they obviously they've had to change their strategy. Yeah. And the third option would be that. The will of the Russian people to sustain not only the current course, but what might be the inevitable course. The will dries up, and they decide that they would rather have someone else representing them on the world stage. I'm in the camp that that's what's going to happen. That they're certainly not going to get what they want. I mean, the Commander-in-Chief's already said yesterday, he said in Poland and in Kyiv, he said, we're in this. This is a Ukrainian victory. We will not allow Russia to win. All right, so the borders aren't going to change. I don't think. And those areas in Donetsk and the Donbass and Luhansk, I think, are going to be pushed back to Russian Federation and Ukrainian borders, previous to 2014. And those are autonomous republics. They'll figure it out.
You think they'll get Crimea back that way?
Yeah, absolutely.
But Russia's just going to be a loser then in this whole thing. Well, Vladimir Putin and the people of Russia, for sure.
They already are.
Yeah.
A year into this, no one thinks that Putin has any successes other than keeping his profile and his face in the news for forever, which counts for something.
Yeah.
No one thinks that this is a strategic success or certainly a tactical success in any sense of the word.
Mm-hmm. Do you think China just holds off to ensure they're not going to align with the losing side? Or do you think that they recognize utility in Putin for stability, and that's what they're looking for?
I think China's interest is how this impacts the United States and how it impacts our interests in with China as well. So that's why I don't think they've jumped in with both feet. Mm-hmm. I don't think you'll see senior leaders with senior leaders planning war strategy or anything like that. Economically, you'll see them together, probably. Yeah. I think they got something coming up here in the next week. lethal weapons, supplying lethal weapons is certainly something that he wants, Putin wants.
He's near peer. Does he not have the same weapons that we have?
Who?
Putin.
No.
So not peer, just near. Gotcha. I assume that they did.
We don't have a peer.
We just have near.
We have near peer competitors.
Even China's near to us, huh? More near.
In generally speaking, yes. If you want to get into particulars, I would suspect a lot of cyber experts would say that we're near peer to China, that they've surpassed us. I just read an article today that said one of our senior military leaders said that we could not compete with China in shipbuilding. Okay, that's a great headline grabber. If you read the article, you'd probably see, we can't pump out the number of smaller ships that they do on a regular basis. I don't think they're building aircraft carriers that are going to rival, ours, overwhelm ours anyway.
Sure.
So I didn't read the article. I just looked at the headline and thought, I know where this is going. This is
the only thing that worries me about China is the amount of intellectual property theft. Like, to be able to steal our schematics for our warplanes, that's a problem. You know what I mean? That's a problem. And that makes us near peer at best, because if they have everything that we have because they're stealing it, which I'm not saying they have everything, but they have a lot of it. There's stuff I know they've stolen that they're using right now, and do we know what all they're stealing? Have they stolen all? That's what makes me, because if they're stealing as much as is being reported, some $2 trillion of intellectual property theft, what can't they steal? What do we have a secret from them?
I'm certain we do.
Okay.
They are prolific in industrial espionage, as far as and defense espionage as well. So they probably have more information than any other country that we don't share with. But we keep up.
Yeah,
we keep up. Can they counter some of our capabilities better than anybody else on the globe? Probably. But I'm still in the camp that our capabilities.
You think they're near peer to us, or we're near peer to them, personally?
From a defense perspective, they're near peer to us.
Okay.
They haven't. No, I'm not. It would be awful. I mean, war in general is awful, but a war with China would be awful.
The worst.
It's just and no, they don't want it, and we don't want it. So,
Well, what about Taiwan?
Taiwan is a question. Absolutely is a question. If Ping is in power long enough where he gets desperate and says, this is something I hung my hat on, 20 years ago, we got to make it happen. Maybe, but I think he's seen enough in our capabilities already to know that if he took control of Taiwan, he wouldn't hold it.
Yeah.
And that if he took control of Taiwan, I think it would be a big question, just because of where it is and where the capabilities that he has are vice where ours are, and we're enhancing our capabilities in the area as well. So even if it's just as a deterrent. I really don't believe he's looking for a fight with the U.S.
I think they're so economically tied to us and us to them that it would just completely shatter everybody's economy to a point of maybe like starvation and like mass problems in the countries.
Right. And which leadership do you think could care less about that?
His.
That's right. So that's
True.
not as much of a deterrent as it is
Okay.
as it is for us. It's certainly a consideration. It's certainly a consideration, but if he hung his hat on taking back Taiwan, there's no cost great enough for him to not do
not do it.
Yeah,
I mean,
But
that roots all the way back to Mao and why they didn't do it in the beginning in the first place. I mean, that's neither here nor there, but
I really don't think that he's looking for a fight. I don't. He's looking to look as strong as he can. I mean, they were a regional power for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're a global power, and you know, a strong China works in our favor sometimes. All right, somebody's got to get a handle on North Korea. They're in the best position to do that. So we're going to count on them to leverage their position and their.
see, that's the things that I don't think about. A strong China can leverage their region
It's a balance of power thing.
and balance it out, so
Yeah,
we
and we can't be everywhere.
don't have to be over there. Yeah, that's a good point.
I only won today.
Yeah. Oh man, what's next?
You know, I did happen to break it into three things. The one thing I did want to make sure that I mentioned was a confidence, capability, and capacity. The three C's that I like to bring into any discussion about assistance to, you know, foreign militaries. Whenever we do that, you can bring weapons platforms in, you can bring ammunition in, you can bring training in, and all that builds capability first. Then if you have enough capability, you build capacity. All right, capability and capacity are big deals. Once you start impacting a foreign military, or any military to include ours, from a capability and capacity perspective, and the folks that are involved in that process recognize how much has been done to enhance those two things, capability and capacity, the next C is confidence. All right, you have those three things, and Ukraine's got them now. All right, they're building their capabilities, have been for a year. Now they're starting to realize that they've got some capacity that'll allow them to sustain operations. All of that has been building their confidence. And their confidence is off the charts, especially if you compare it with what they're looking at on the other side. Not even close. I mean, you see it in any interview. Common people, lawyers, doctors, farmers that are out in the front lines. Now they're doing something completely different, and they're confident in what they're doing, whether it's operating a drone or operating a 155. It doesn't make it. They know what they're doing. They're professional soldiers now.
Yeah.
So that's those three things. Whenever I see something and I see a new platform introduced, or I see $1 million worth of artillery rounds being pushed out, I mean, I understand that's a part of the three C's for me, anyways. Capability, capacity, and coincidence.
Coincidence or confidence?
Confidence.
Confidence.
I'll slip it down. Where you asked where it ends, we're starting to look at war crimes now. I mean, you saw the vice president talk a couple days ago about naming them. That's official U.S. policy now. They're going to be held accountable, and they're going to have to pay reparations. That's going to hurt their economy even further.
It's going to be like the Treaty of Versailles. We're going to have a panel come together and
Nuremberg trials,
trials.
I don't know. I don't think it works like that the same way exactly anymore. And bringing Kremlin leaders to trial is problematic, anyways. Most of them would be in absentia, I think. But it's still it's symbolic, and you got frozen assets. There's talk about using those frozen assets right now to start reparations in Ukraine, and that may very well be.
Now, who makes that policy though? Who's going to make Russia do that? Or is this you saying after this is resolved, that's going to be
internationally? It'll go to a tribunal of some sort, and the decision will be made to Russia will hate something like that probably.
Yeah.
NATO's going to look a lot different in the end. Already is looking different. You've got non-aligned states that are saying, "Hey, I want in. I want in now." NATO border with Russia just got 600 kilometers longer. Okay, and that's going to continue to happen. That's going to continue to have an impact on Russian security policies and budgets. We just need to get to the point where we can work well enough with them so that they understand that, lots of countries are on lots of countries' borders. They're not at war. All right. If they were at war, the fuse is short. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. All right. But 21st century, you don't get the luxury of buffer states anymore. That's not, especially if you're the aggressor.
Right.
All right. So that's.
And you think it ends in Crimea?
I do. I have said that for a long time.
Makes sense to me.
I'm not the only one, obviously, that's thinking about something like that. But that would be where I would make my final push, and that's where I would make my final stand, probably. Yeah. I think. I don't think it makes sense to split forces. If Ukraine could afford to open two fronts, southern front and an eastern front, to keep Russia occupied on two different fronts. But I don't know if Ukraine's capable of doing that right now.
Capacity-wise?
Yes, capability-wise, perhaps. Capacity-wise, I'm not sure. And that opens a lot of eyes in Russia and in NATO. When something like that happens, it's like, wow, this is happening. Mm-hmm. All right, and then Russia's going to have to make a decision. Russian people are going to have to make a decision. Mm-hmm. Are they okay with this happening and starting fresh after this? Or do they want to continue to push for what some people are calling a reconstitution of the Russian Empire or the former Soviet Union? I'm in the camp that the Russian people are going to make the right choice. I'm not putting all my eggs in that basket, but I think we can continue to shape what's going on, NATO and Ukraine, to the point where the Russian people, those that are influential enough to make decisions, will find the types of leaders that they want to represent them on the world stage.
Going forward, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, 90 minutes.
Was it really?
Went fast, didn't it?
Yeah.
I look forward to
a soapbox out in front of me. It's going to take up 90 minutes.
I look forward to more conversations in the future, and I really do appreciate you coming on and just giving us what you have as far as answering my questions. And to my community, this is the closest I can get to the horse, to get the word from the horse's mouth. Somebody that's been there, understands the culture, understands the language, and has spent a lot of time studying, working, being in and around other militaries, and spent time inside of Russia. So, from the bottom of my heart, me, Matt, I appreciate you coming out here and doing this, and I look forward to more conversations, especially offline. But if we can gin up more as this goes and kind of track the progress of what's going on that side of the world, I'd love to do that in the future. So,
my pleasure to be here anytime I can help a brother out like this. That's the reason I did it. The landscape's going to change. And the next, every 2 weeks there'll be something else to talk about. So I see you a couple times a month at the post. We get into a conversation that you think is worthy of putting out in a podcast. Just let me know.
Awesome. Well, Rick, I appreciated it. And guys, till next time, choices, not chances.
Well, that concludes this episode. Thanks for listening to Choices Not Chances podcast. Please share, like, and subscribe wherever you listen or watch our podcast. You can also follow us on social media at Choices Not Chances podcast. Thanks, and have a great day.
Louisiana Gun Shop, your firearm headquarters, specializing in concealed carry guns, ammo, and training. You can get your Louisiana permit with us. Also a large selection of AR-15s, or if you are that build-it-yourself type of guy or gal, we have all the parts to build and customize your own AR-15. Glock, SIG, Taurus, Ruger. We have all the brands, both in the store or at LouisianaGunShop.com.
Not too far. You're marking a building. Hit him. Yeah, that's good.
That's a good shot. That's money. Yeah.